Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. Welcome once again to the Sulaimaan Ravat show. And yes, we are broadcasting to you from our studios in Sunninghill, Johannesburg on the DSTV platform channel 346 ITV networks. Now, in any country, anywhere in the world, one of the most important things that comes up for discussion is education. And it goes without saying, even though we remind ourselves every now and again, and so we should, that when it comes to the requirements for any human, irrespective of creed, irrespective of race or background or nationality, education is right there on the top. From governments to communities to leaders in different spheres and different environments, everyone has a focus on education. And when it comes to parents, one of the key aspects that they look at, one of the key areas of concern and focus that they have, and as far as the upbringing of their children, the nurturing of the children, the development of the children, planning for the future of the children is education. Now, we haven't had a very good start to the year in as far as what has been happening in schools. There has been great concern. We know the incident that took place, the drowning of a young boy at the Parktown High boys' school. Excursion, if you want to call it, outreach program, team development, all different words have been floating around in the media. Then we've had other incidents and in other schools, and all of them have been so horrific, so tragic. And it's brought the whole aspect of the safety in schools, governance in schools, whose responsibility it is when it comes to certain aspects of the safety of the children. All of this has come into focus, all of this has come under discussion as a result of these tragic happenings that have taken place in our country of late. And unfortunately, just as the academic year got going. Now, we commenced the discussion this evening with Christo Alvachen. He is a person who has a very interesting background when it comes to school governing bodies, when it comes to serving at that particular level, and we're going to have a discussion in that regard. Christo, thank you so much for your time this evening. Welcome to the program.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me.
All right, a bit of a bio, if I can put it that way. Tell us a little bit about yourself, just to introduce you to our viewers.
Thank you, certainly. In real life, I'm a consultant, so I help businesses improve their processes, look at how they do businesses better, think about how we operate in the environment of business, and have been doing that for 4 or 5 years. Previously worked in a corporation in various jobs around understanding how to make the businesses and the corporations work. It was a large corporation with a heavy focus on safety. So it has taken me a couple of years to de-indoctrinate some of the procedures and things we had. So an interesting example, holding onto railings when you walk down and upstairs.
Yeah.
In terms of school governance, it has always been important for my wife and myself that we as parents can get involved in the school. So we lived in many different cities and houses during the course of my career. And there were a couple of schools where the principal and the teachers just did not want the parents to know, in a sense, what was going on in the education of the child, in the activities of the school. The attitude was sometimes we know what we are doing. And that didn't work for us as a family. So my view around being involved, which I think we can explore later, is very much we want to have the ability to be part of the school. And as a consequence, I do serve on the governing bodies of both schools where my daughters are. It is something that is really important for us. I must say that my wife and myself, when we heard about the Parktown boy incident, we were horrified. Firstly, for the family of the boy. That's what a terrible thing to happen. But also for the school and the boys and the management team of the school and the HTB. Because the school is not a building. A school is a community with a common purpose, and something like that hurts the community. Our condolences to the families of the boys. No matter what else happens, it is just a heart-wrenching thing as a school governor and as a parent and as a human being to hear about.
When something as tragic as that happens, naturally people want there to be someone who takes responsibility. We know that subsequently the Department of Education has taken certain steps, etc. There will be an investigation. It could be a bit of a long drawn out process. There's the tragedy. there is the acceptance that this didn't happen intentionally. Nobody went and did this intentionally. But how do you go about navigating around this debate in terms of where does the buck stop?
Because I guess my background as a consultant and the way that my brain works, I can seldom find a single point of failure. Systems usually don't break because one thing went wrong. If we look at some of the disasters in the companies that I worked for, if you look at the history of the disasters and the policies and the processes, that happened to result in a fatality. There's often a whole bunch of small things that didn't happen. And sometimes those things were unforeseen. So what happened was we didn't expect that to happen. So how do we change things so that when that happens again, we know what to do? And sometimes it was a series of small things that built up. So I don't think there is something goes wrong and you can immediately point to that is what went wrong and that is accountable. As humans, it makes us happier, I think, if we can say he or she did it. But in complex worlds and complex systems, seldom the case. And I'm not going to prejudge the outcome. One of the questions we did pose to the SGBs that we're in is there are processes we have for vetting suppliers. Are they being followed? There are broken processes, I think, in the way that the schools and the department interact. So the forms that the department have to complete or ask the schools to complete do not reflect the reality. And let's use a particular example that is a specific problem for the schools. We take our kids to sporting events. So some schools come and play sports at our school, and sometimes we go to their school. And we hire bus companies to transport the kids, and those bus companies are vetted. The problem we have is that we have to put the driver's ID and license into the application to have a bus to go to another school. And we don't know who's going to drive the bus. So what do you now do? Do you fill in the form hoping that it's okay or that you've got the right driver, or the system has been created that it is not possible to comply, and the department doesn't have the resources to actually check that. So what we have said is we've got a professional bus company. We've looked at the systems that they have around their drivers, so we know that the driver who pitches on the day will be licensed and checked and all the things that we want. But the system we have does not allow the department to manage that properly. So the system failure, in a sense, is that we have an elected body called the governing bodies. We have asked them to assist the school management teams in ensuring that schools operate well and safely. So we should trust that they are able to do that job and train them to do that job if they're not able to. When that system fails, it is very difficult to say it was the governing body chairman or it was the bursar or the treasurer or the principal's fault that this happened, because they're all part of managing that community. We all have a shared responsibility. I would not be comfortable saying when something happens like that at my school, it was the head of the sports team's fault. Because our job as governors was to make sure that she has got the skills and the resources and the policies and the support to do the right thing. I also realize that I do speak from a position of privilege. Our school is one of the very small percentage of schools that charge school fees, which means that we do have resources. We can afford professional bus companies. And that's not the case for everybody in the province. So let's calibrate that around. We have the resources to be able to develop and apply policies that make the place better for our children.
Yeah. All right, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we continue the discussion on safety in schools with Christo Alvachen. Welcome back. So we're talking about safety in schools, and our guest in studio this evening is Christo Olvachen. He's involved with school governing bodies, and he gave us a bit of a background in terms of how he viewed recent tragic happenings in schools in the beginning of the academic year. I think you very accurately mentioned that it's difficult to pinpoint one individual as being responsible. That said, when there's a number of tragedies that happen in such a short space of time, it starts to tell us a story that we need to relook the system. We need to relook the processes and procedures, no?
Yes, or be aware of them. We have resources. There is a lot of support for school management teams and school governing bodies around how to run schools effectively and how to set up policies and procedures. So the how to create that environment is well known. How to do safety risk assessment on transport companies, those sort of things are well known. So if that doesn't happen, then you have to start saying what caused that. And if we go back to safety in large industrial companies, sometimes happens through familiarity. I walk this way every day, so I'm so used to walking the way that I'm no longer looking for hazards along it, is a typical cause of tripping. So if we then say there is an environment and there is a system, and there are guidelines on how to do that, what went wrong? Is it a lack of skill in the people who are applying the policies, or a lack of time, because they've got a million other things that they have to do as a school management team, or familiarity, or just a lack of awareness that this is something that I have to do? Managing a school is a complex thing. My previous principal at one of the schools had a pack of books this thick, and she knew everything at it. What I loved about that is when we had a conversation, she was able to go and say, rule this, or directive that, or memo this, says that this is what we should do. But she was fairly unique in that respect of being able to remember all the rules and regulations and being able to point to them. Mm-hmm. If you're a school principal or a governor who's just been elected onto the governing body, we've just had a big round of by-elections now, you may not have the experience or the knowledge or the time to go dig into it. So continuity is one of the reasons in our governing body system that I think that sometimes it's hard to remember. And again, we can try to transfer the institutional knowledge to the next governing body by saying, hey people, here's our list of policies and registers, and it's been 2 years since we looked at the language policy and the clothing policy and so forth. Read through these, understand them. Many of these people, or in fact all of us, are volunteers, and there is a time thing. There is a ability to understand, and there is and I'm trying to avoid the idea of a willingness to engage with the problem. Because you come into a school assuming that it's well run, assuming that the policy and things are being applied. And as governors, our job is to focus on the core issues. So a few years ago we had Hair Must Fall. And every governing body I knew about was saying, okay, so what do we do with hair policies? Mm-hmm. Is our hair policy appropriate? What is our stance on uniforms? What is our stance, very topically, on Muslim dress codes for girls, on bracelets for Hindu girls, the little red bracelets, strings, the little strings. So what is our policy as a school on that, and how does the school management team apply that policy? That's what we do as governors. The school management team runs the school, and we make sure that they run the school according to the wishes of the parents. Because ultimately school governing bodies it's the third level of election in South Africa. It's one of the biggest election rounds we have. So I represent the wishes of my community. What is the wishes of my community in terms of how we manage safety, language, access to extramurals? I think saying don't do extramurals, because this is the elephant in a room. Should we stop all enrichment camps? Should we stop school trips? Should we stop the grade 2s from going to the zoo? I think that is the wrong knee-jerk response. Many of the kids in the primary school come from very disadvantaged backgrounds. For some of them, that trip to the zoo was the first time they saw a real elephant. And it was a fantastic day for them, and it blew their minds open for learning. because that's what we're trying to do with the enrichment, is let's open your mind for learning. So we can't stop that. That would not be in the interest of the learner. What we have to do is assess the risk around it and say, going to the zoo, what can go wrong? Yeah, probably the road to the zoo is the most dangerous, and we have to make sure that the group is contained and controlled and managed. For the high school students, the risk profile may look different. Specifically, the incident that we are talking about. What could go wrong in this environment? How do we manage that risk? So that's our job as governors, is to help the school management team think about that and manage it to the risk that's acceptable to us as the community.
When we talk about the recent happenings, right, certain aspects of safety come to the fore, but it's a much broader issue, it's a much deeper issue. There's violence from students. We hear about that ever so often. There has been talk at some stage about bringing in metal detectors, having permanent security staff within schools. The department don't seem too keen about that. They feel that it'll just change the whole environment of the school in a very negative way. Others feel, and some months back we had the spokesperson for the National Department of Basic Education on the program, and he was saying, look, we have to face up to the reality that we live in an environment and we live in a community where violence is rife and where safety is constantly under threat. And unfortunately that spills over and into schools. What's the way forward, right? Ideally, all of us as South Africans would like to wake up tomorrow morning and everything's hunky-dory and the crime is at tolerable levels. But we've been grappling with this for the better part of 2.5 decades, the crime situation in the country. Should we now be more pragmatic, more realistic than idealistic and say, look, safety first and perceptions and environment and all of that second?
I do know the Americans had the same conversation as do we bring metal detectors and things into schools. We have a culture problem, I think, fundamentally. So in the ideal world, we can deal with the real men don't rape and the violence and those issues which are driven by frustration, poverty, racial tensions that our politicians will manipulate to their own advantage. For me, there's a balance. Putting metal detectors and security guards in classes creates an environment of fear, which is not an environment that is conducive to learning. But we can also not say, let kids be kids. One of the things I am concerned about, and in the areas we work in, we are looking at that, is we have rightfully moved in the last 25 years heavily to focusing on the rights of the child. So the removal of corporal punishment, verbal abuse, bullying, singling out children, all the things that we no longer do in classrooms. Those are good things. What we have not balanced that out with is to give the teacher the authority to manage his or her class. So what we do when a learner puts a video of a learner baiting a teacher to the point where that teacher loses it. Again, I looked at that video as a governor and I was horrified that had happened, that we had not given the teacher the skills to deal with that, but also that as governors and school management team, we have almost no leg to stand on to work with that learner to say your behavior is unacceptable. Let's help you change that behavior through constructive working positively, but also with consequences. So if there are consequences for bad behavior in schools from learners that are enforceable, that gives the teachers an ability to control the environment better. So I think we need to look at the discipline and control in schools from a more balanced point of view. We have the rights of the child, but we have the rights and the duties of the teacher, which is to create a safe learning environment for everybody. Bringing weapons into schools, clearly unacceptable. And in fact, by the Schools Governance Act, in terms of disciplinary infractions, it is illegal. It is almost the case immediately for expulsion. So the environment is there, the enforcement is problematic, Putting security guards in schools would suggest that you have a deeper community problem. And let's talk about community problems where the community is annoyed with the school, so we burn down the school. How does that solve the problem?
Yeah.
So let's create the space where the school is respected, where the teacher is respected, and where the teacher and the school is able to enforce a code of conduct. And most schools do have code of conducts. If I don't like the school code of conduct, I can choose to put my child somewhere else. And when it comes to my responsibility as a parent, if I'm looking at my learning environment for my daughter or my son, I have 2 daughters. So 2 daughters in this country means that my awareness of security is higher.
Yeah.
But I have to choose a school that aligns with my values. I have to choose a school that allows my daughters to grow up in an environment that supports my values and where I would like to see them go.
All right.
So that for me is how we fix that problem. In the short term, do we put security guards, metal detectors, controls at gates? If I have a community where that is a real problem, that might be the thing that I need to do. It might just be that it is easier and better to remove the problem learners from that environment. So if you are behaving like this, and we do have an incident of, at the primary school, a young boy that we'd worked with over a course of 4 years. He had numerous disciplinaries for small things, stealing stuff, hitting children, and so forth. We eventually, reluctantly, after the 4th or 5th disciplinary, asked the department to expel him because he was becoming a danger to other learners. Mm-hmm. And that was overturned. So what message the other learners have is, this boy has been allowed to continue to do this stuff. What the message to the teachers was is,
No consequences, yeah.
There's a file of this thick of incidents and events and descriptions and testimonials from the others, and nothing happens with that. It becomes really hard for me as the chairman of the governing body to say to teachers, we are behind you in trying to establish this code of conduct. So we really have to fix that system so that there are consequences for unacceptable behavior. I'm assuming that in most children's houses, there is a line that you don't cross as the child. The same thing needs to happen at the school.
Correct.
We talk about the concept of in loco parentis, so the school is the parent while the child is at the school. And we don't allow the parent while the child is at the school to apply the rules that we apply at home.
That's a very strong point. Let's take a break again. When we come back, we talk about this very important discussion around safety in schools. Welcome back. So we're talking about safety in schools, and in the first 2 segments we were talking to Christo Olvachen. He's involved with schools at governing body level. Joining in now with us in studio, we've got the spokesperson for the Department of Basic Education in Gauteng, Steve Moulana. Steve, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Good evening and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
These recent incidents obviously are of great concern to the department. What's your analysis at this stage? What should we be looking at? We understand that there are processes, there are investigations that will take time. It's all about pinpointing who's responsible for what happened. But holistically speaking, what do we learn from this? How do we move forward from this?
Look, we need community involvement. We need parents to work with us, because we work very closely with the police. They undertook to take care of us in the sense that they will be visible in and around our schools. But they cannot be always, all the time, be in and around our schools, because, so many things are happening in the country. Level of crime, it's skyscraping. They need to attend to those incidences. But for us, it's more about reporting on time. Because once the police are informed that there's something that is happening at school, they will be there, very swiftly. We have seen where schools are torched. Within seconds, they are there. Also, the firefighters will then be deployed. So it's an indication that if whistleblowers are many, probably we will find ourselves not having so many incidences. Probably criminals will be caught. Unless if those incidences where you see that probably here there might be inside job. There's intelligence that came, from inside that was given to some of those criminals. Then that's where the problem is. But whistleblowing and making sure that we alert the police, that will assist. Because in other instances, we have patrollers that are at school. I mean, there's a school that was vandalized last night in Funnel Bay. There's a patroller there, but he had to hide for his safety. So even if you have people at school, once they are caught off guard, probably they will not be in a position to can press even the panic button, because there are schools that have armed response where your patrollers will be in a position to can press the button, and probably the armed response will come. But we were burglared at some of the schools that had armed response, panic button, but that the patroller could not even reach the panic button because of the number of people that came at the time, the weapons that they were carrying. Then you think about your life, and then you deter, or you retreat rather. So it's quite a situation where we feel that if the community can work with us, make sure that we blow the whistle as much as possible, so that we can quell this, because our schools are in the communities. There's no school that is far-flung, that is a standalone. There's no houses in and around the school. You don't have such schools. So hence we normally tell the public when we meet with them to say, if something is happening at night at school, you must know that it's not the department. We've got nothing to do at school at night. I mean, we can't be doing anything at night. So once you see something, that should be an alarm for you to say, what are people doing at night at school?
One is the external forces, right? Like the examples you've given, people who come in big numbers and they vandalize the school or they torch the school, maybe because a protest is taking place or something of that sort. The other is violence where the perpetrators are within the boundaries of the school, student on student, where we've had instances of rape, we've had instances of extreme bullying. We've had instances of teachers, of students hitting teachers. There has been this call from some quarters that we have to now face up to the reality. Violence, unfortunately, is part of our society, and we need to seriously look now at having metal detectors in schools, having security in schools, perhaps even in the classrooms, so that it's never perfect. Things can still go wrong, but at least it gives parents and teachers a bit of a feeling of security within an environment where they ought to be teaching and learning.
Now, when we look at that kind of violence, what we did, we have identified about 25 schools where we have seen the level of ill discipline, absenteeism, some sense of bullying, drug peddling, drug abuse in terms of utilization, and agreed with the police that when you go to these schools, don't even inform the principal, because we don't know whether information will filter down to the educators. Maybe some of these learners work with educators, you won't know, or with some of the staff members. So when you go to those schools, just go in there. Already, you don't need to seek permission. That's what we've agreed with the Department of Community Safety and Liaison and the Provincial Commissioner. Go into those schools, pounce. If there are drugs, deal with those that have drugs. If there are weapons, deal with those that have weapons. And up to so far, they've been doing a sterling work. I mean, they have detected daga, drugs, weapons, that are unwanted at our schools. Alcohol to a certain extent. So they are going in those schools. And what we did as well, we identified about 5,000 of potential bullies, or those that we have a pattern of them being mischievous, in some instances. Say, take them to a diversion program. We took about 400 just before the end of last year. 400 of those, they've been taken to diversion program, working with the NGOs, NGOs that work with children, social development, NPA, because we take them through the process of prosecution. What steps are taken for you to be prosecuted? Take them to prison tour, so that they see and experience the life beyond bars on what is really happening there. And for a week, and then probably social workers drift into their lives. If there's a need for home visit, they do that, visit those households and check how do they lead their lives there. So that has been happening, and we hope that the remainder of that 5,000 will be taken through the process as well. Make sure that we, divert them from all, deeds, because our challenge is that we might expel to a certain extent, to say this one we expel because of ill discipline, but we still have an obligation as a department to place that child somewhere else because it's the school age going learner.
But is the department in favor or opposed to having permanent security personnel within school premises and having metal detectors and the like?
Look, from where we're sitting, we can't afford it.
Those schools that can afford it, would you be in favor of them installing it?
No, look, I mean, as I'm talking to you now, schools are, there's surveillance cameras, there's armed response to a certain extent. It depends on the school. I mean, Quintal 4 and 5 schools can afford to even appoint security, firms to be available there on a 24-hour basis, and armed response will be, patrolling the schools. It depends on, the pace of the school. So we've allowed them to do that. Okay. But majority of our schools, which are no fee-paying schools, then that's where we have a problem. And you can't then expect the department to foot that bill, because we say, for us, it's education. I mean, if you were to ask us, where would you want to spend money, we will tell you that we want to appoint teachers, want to improve the quality of teaching, want to make sure that all schools digitally, they are improved, they are changed. We don't want the chalkboard. We want to move with time, for the Industrial Revolution. We've been moving to the 5th now. So all those improvements, because they need to change the quality of education that we provide. That's where our focus is. That's where our priority is. Opening schools of specializations, making sure that learners are taught something that is going to assist them in future. Yeah. Not just to be in a classroom and when they, move away from, your schooling, then they still stuck. They don't know what the future holds for them. They don't know what to go, what to do and where to go. That's why the introduction of the national education certificate, the one that will be your grade 9, it's for them to say one has drifted away from this level of education, which can assist. If one need to choose a certain career, we'll be in a position to do that because of that certificate. But it does not mean that that person would then be out of school. So all those we try by all means to improve. But for us to say we're going to appoint security guards and
there's no budget for it.
Machinery on security, we don't have budget for that.
I'd love to latch onto that point.
Yeah, I'll get to you in a moment. We're just going to take our final break, and when we come back, we continue the discussion with Steve and Crystal. Welcome back. So we've been having a discussion around safety at schools, and we've got the spokesperson for the Basic Department of Education in Gauteng. We've also got Christo here, who's a member of a school governing body. Now, Christo, just before the break, you wanted to comment on what Steve was saying?
Yes, I think the limited budget from the department has to be focused towards improving education. And the point that you made earlier around communities need to value the school, I think we can have a bigger impact if we get communities to value the school and be involved in it and protect it and create. We were talking earlier about the culture of discipline, consequences, and what is it that our community and schools want to have. So I think we're going to get a better long-term effect by getting communities to care about schools, not just the building, but the entire community that is the school.
From an SGB perspective, what's your thoughts and sentiments on how the department can assist schools in improving the levels of safety especially?
I think if the challenge we face is getting parents to be involved in schools and getting to stand for SGB and participate in elections and just become part of that community. The department could help us in that sense by making it easier for SGBs to do what SGBs should do, which is governing, and making it easier for the schools to be able to focus on that. So we're talking about bureaucracy and administration and data submission, and I'm sure you get a lot of feedback around those requirements. The department pointing out that they value SGBs as the elected representatives of the parent body would put a lot of weight around come and participate in the SGB, be part of the SGB because the department values your input. And that, I think that's something that's probably fairly easy to achieve in terms of the words that we are using when we speak about each other in public and in private.
Steve, from your perspective, I mean, with a particular focus on safety, what do you feel from the department side the specific role of the SGB should be? You mentioned earlier on about the broader role of the community, but specifically focusing on SGBs, what can they do better to ensure greater safety in our schools?
Look, 80% of what happens at school or schools, it's on the shoulders of the SGB. They play a major role in governance. Almost everything that happens there. We have a responsibility to make sure that there's quality education. But in terms of governance, they are in charge. That's why where you have a SGB that is dysfunctional, it affects the school dearly. It affects the school dearly because a dysfunctional SGB, SGB posts will suffer. They don't want to sign, they don't want to pay. Now, employees are not paid because they are fighting amongst themselves. One, they are fighting for resources at school. Two, they have an interest to benefit out of what is procured, who procures, where, how are they procuring, one or the other. They want to benefit there. So if we have SGB that are genuine, that have an interest at heart of their children, we will not find ourselves in a situation whereby SGB is dysfunctional. But we just want to put an emphasis that SGBs must be fully functional and gain the trust of parents. Because if parents don't have trust in the SGB, then that's how they're going to be paralyzed. So the parent body should entrust them with everything that is at school because they will be then accountable. So if SGBs that sometimes forget that they are elected by parents.
Yes.
They want to operate as if it's their school, school only takes so many decisions. They even forget to call a parent body meeting. Because if you are stuck and you don't know what to do, as an SGB, you must call the parent body so that they can then assist you to make some of these decisions. But some, they don't. So, in essence, full participation of parent body is important. You might be leading as an SGB, but don't forget that you have parent body. They might have ideas that will assist you. And like as he says, the participation of parents, it will then make an SGB to succeed. Where we are sitting, our officials knows that SGB is elected, they have a role to play, and they have legislation that is empowering them to do what they do. Our officials, they know SASA Act, they go through it almost every day. If they're not sure, they go there and consult and check. We've got legal team that will always advise to say, no, that's not the space. So it's important that each and every one at school must know what is it that is expected of them. SGB must know. They must not need someone to remind them that this is your role.
Yeah.
That's why after election we take them through orientation process, and we all insist that they must come to that. The current SGB term is ending. Next year we are busy with we'll be electing the new SGBs. So it's important that they need to be orientated. They must understand their role and be effective in what they do. I mean, we won't find ourselves in a situation whereby every time there's something, then they must wait for the MEC to come and resolve something. Yes. We had a bullying incident in Garankuwa. It happened the day before yesterday. We saw the visuals in the social media yesterday. We had to go to that school yesterday and make sure that the child is suspended. They should have done that on the day of the incident because it happened in around the morning. Why didn't they converge and say, this one, I mean, we've already seen because it has been reported at school. Why don't you call the meeting immediately? sit there, suspend the learner. When it hit the social media, we would have been told that no, don't worry, the child is at home already. This is what we have done. No. Yesterday we had to say the child must be suspended, and we then say the victim of the parent victim. Then they said we want to open a case, and we said no, we support you. Open the case. The child was arrested last night and appeared this morning at court, and the court could not release. I mean, they kept the child in custody. So the next appearance will be on the 5th of February. Back to my point that SGB must not forget what is their role. Infighting will then make them be dysfunctional, and then we'll disband them.
So we're almost out of time. A quick concluding remark from your side about safety in schools?
Yes, come back to these are terrible incidents. We live in an unsafe world, and as the community of the department, the school management team, the SGB, the parents, the learners, it is up to us to try and make that environment as safe as possible and to try and avoid things that we could have avoided by thinking through. Accidents do happen. I would say that we as parents have to say, life is uncertain. My child has to go out there and learn how to live life. What I have to do is to say, have I mitigated that risk? Do I understand that environment as good as possible? And I cannot do that as a parent if I'm not involved in the school. So if you are concerned about your child's safety, go and get involved in the school, go and talk to your elected SGB, make sure that they are doing what you want them to do.
Steve, your final word?
Look, we just need to work together. If we work together, we will probably win the situation that we are at. But if we don't, all these incidences will continue. But we just need to work together.
Steve and Christo, thank you both for your time this evening. We really appreciate it, and let's hope that we can all work together to create a safer environment for our children in school so that they can be educated in a far more acceptable way with far greater sense of peace and calm and serenity for the betterment of all South Africans. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, until next week, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.